Power, and even more specifically, power differences, shape everything that goes on in human relationships. Power is relevant to one-on-one relationships, to family, to groups, and it applies all the time in our workplaces and in organizational life, and also within larger systems, like within the system of nations. This is too frequently disregarded by even some of my colleagues who are therapists, who are advisors, consultants of various sorts. They tend to focus more on communication. But it's really important to note that power sets the stage for communication, because a lot of times people have great communication skills, but one party or several parties will listen less respectfully and less responsibly to some who are speaking because of the power difference. This is always fundamental to what's going on. My name's Ken Dolan-Del, and my YouTube channel is called Work Life Confidential. I share critical thinking on leadership, on parenting, on relationships of all kinds. And if you find this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. Today, I want to address the basics. What is power? How do we get it? And then I want to share two visions of power that are helpful for understanding what we're seeing in the world, and also helpful for making a decision about how we want to apply the power that we have as individuals and as leaders and as parents. I want to note that in this video, I'm talking about the power we hold as individuals. There's so much that can be gained through collective action, collective empowerment. But today I'm talking about the power that we have, with a special emphasis on how we use our power as organizational leaders and within our families. I'm also very interested in your thoughts. So as I share my definition, I welcome your comments because I'd love to learn from your wisdom. So power is the ability and freedom to control resources, starting with our own bodies and our own time. And the more resources we have at our disposal, the more power we have. And those resources can be a wide variety of things that include wealth, which is a primary source of power, technology, and other people's time and other people's labor. So how do we get power? Well, in a really primitive sense, we get some power from our size and from our strength. And so as we're growing up, we gain more power in that regard. And generally, men are bigger than women. It's a broad stroke, but it's one that is worth mentioning because of the ways that some of us choose to use our power. We get our power from our connections, our relationships with other people who have more power than we do. So we have some referential power, if you will, or relationship-based power. We get our power from the kinds of achievements that we've made in the world that give us status that's widely recognized. So the educational degrees that we receive, the titles that we receive. Maybe we've got the title doctor, or maybe we have another title like senator, or something that immediately signifies that we have a certain kind of status that gives us power and authority. We get our power from the privileges that those around us give us because of things that are just outside of our control, like our skin color, like our gender, like our sexual orientation, like our disability or ability status. These things determine, in many cases, how we're going to be seen by others in terms of things like, are we going to be given the benefit of the doubt if we make an error? If we're in a public place, are we going to be seen as benign, or are we going to be seen by others as potentially a threat or potentially criminal? So the privileges that the world ascribes to us also add to the total amount of power that we have. we also gain a certain amount of power from our ability to influence others. So communication skills, while they are often not all that central to what's going on in a relationship, because as I mentioned before, communication skills only go so far if we're not being listened to by somebody who has more power than us and chooses to use it in a way that's dismissive. It is important to note that communication skills can be helpful insofar as we're able to influence others in certain circumstances. I mentioned this once earlier. It probably can't be mentioned too much that gaining access to wealth is also one of the primary ways that we gain power. So I want to talk about the two visions of power that are fundamental to understanding what we're seeing in other people and what our choices are for ourselves in using the power that we have. There are essentially these two ways of understanding power, and they are power over, which is power conceptualized and used as domination, and power with. Power with is understanding your power as the awesome responsibility to facilitate, to support the development of shared benefits for others with whom you're connected, and perhaps others in general. And depending on how we understand what power means, we're likely to apply it in one way or another. So you see this visual that represents these two visions of power, and let me walk through it with you. So this very simple graphic is something that I use all the time. I carry it with me in my head, and I use it to make sense of what's going on when I'm doing an advising assignment, when I'm working with a couple or a group of people or a workplace team. And so I hope it's useful for you in the same way. And it's a very simple way to make sense of power. And on the left you see power over. And this is the model that we've seen most of the time. We see it all the time in the world. And it's power understood as the right to control others, the right to direct how people are going to do things and how they're going to use their time, and the power to direct how resources are going to be deployed and used. And it presumes that the person with power can tell others what to do and how to do things, and it just presumes this sense of ultimate authority. And it is all about command and control. It's not about support and negotiation. It's about do it. Do it when I tell you to do it, as I tell you to do it. And it looks at differences in a way that is negative. So differences are seen as challenges to authority. Differences are seen as things that have to be evaluated and put in some kind of hierarchical order. And so this power over is it's the way that gender has been organized historically. And I see sexism and patriarchy, male control of females, and everything associated with females being devalued relative to everything that's associated with males, as the starting place for power over. And it has been expanded over time to look at all differences and put them in hierarchical order. So it's the root of racism, it's the root of homophobia or heterosexism, it's the root of ableism, ageism, and power over, when it's being used and we recognize any difference, the questions that come to mind are ranking questions. Which way is right and which way is wrong? Which way is healthy and which way is unhealthy? Which way is holy and which way is unholy? And so it's never a question of equality. It's always a question that has to do with establishing dominance. And generally comes down to the statement, I'm right and you're wrong. And finally, one of the most interesting and unfortunate things about power over is that it presumes that there is a limited economy of power, if you will. There's only so much power to go around. And so if any group is gaining power, then the group that has more power to begin with must be losing it. So if women are gaining the vote, then men must be losing something. If queer people are getting the same rights of citizenship, the protections of marriage that are afforded to heterosexual citizens, and somehow straight people who are married are losing something. It's this very unfortunate and at times absurd notion that there's only so much power to go around. Now, power with is the other option, and it's the one that thoughtful organizations are striving for, and people who see a world where we're all equal and are striving for that are using as their vision. And in a power with world, power is understood essentially as love. Power is understood as the awesome responsibility to do everything I can to facilitate shared success, shared benefits, shared access to resources, all good things for all of us. And it, instead of command and control, instead of domination, it's about facilitation. How can I get obstacles out of the way so that these team members can succeed and not waste their time on tasks that are not really relevant to our mission? That's the kind of thinking. It's all about collaboration. It's how do we together get things done? Whereas domination is all about me, when power over is all about me, power with is all about we. And it approaches differences with an open heart, with an open mind, with questions like, wow, you do things differently. What can I learn from that? What can you learn from the way I see things? What can we learn together by sharing our experiences, our perspectives, our differences? And always there's an eye toward how can all of us gain from our different perspectives, our different backgrounds, our different approaches to solving problems. It's always a thinking in a way that is trying to bring us closer together rather than to establish rigid hierarchy and bring us farther apart, put up walls between us. And finally, in a power with framework, there's the idea that everybody can gain more power. So if women are in the workplace, then we're all gaining what they have to offer. The way that women might typically think about things a bit differently than men may typically think about things. And so there's been conversations about how men in general may be more results focused, more linear in our thinking. Again, these are very broad strokes and they don't apply to every person in every circumstance. And women are perhaps more contextually thinking about all of the different ways that any decision might be affecting others, and thinking about who needs to be consulted to make sure that they feel adequately included, what team members, what stakeholders, thinking about impact. And if we bring these kinds of perspectives together, you see that everybody gains. And so how do queer people do their relationships? How do we do our relationships in a way that maybe has something to teach straight people? That's the thinking in a power with frame. And just to go a little farther and give some examples, so you would be hard pressed to find a better example of somebody who exercises power over than Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is all about telling people what to do, feeling like he's got the right information and the right knowledge on how to do everything. And you see that there are costs, there are significant costs to not including experts from other areas, most notably from the public health arena. And we could go on because Donald Trump is in some ways a caricature of power over, but it's very common in political leaders. And so we're now, for example, learning about Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, and the ways that he has berated and bullied others. So this pattern is common in the world, more common than the power with way of approaching power. Power with we see in the behavior of people like Martin Luther King, all about bringing people together to try to create a loving community, trying to end militarism, trying to end poverty. And we see it in people like Jonas Salk, who was the physician researcher who is credited with creating the polio vaccine. And when he was asked if it would be patented, because he could obviously make a fortune off it, he said no. In fact, his quote, the way I understand it, was, "Would you patent the sun?" Because he wanted everybody to benefit from the vaccine. So power with is this very generative way of thinking about how we can all gain and how what I do is going to be beneficial to others. Not just about serving me, not just about taking care of me, putting me first. And so there are lots of benefits that come with power with, whether we're in a leadership role in an organization or whether we're a parent. And these are, the benefits are things like people feeling included, people willing to give their best efforts, discretionary effort. In a family, it's all about feeling loved and respected, never being diminished by the things that a parent says. Even when you're being corrected, we can always talk to others in a way that is kind and helpful, even if we're offering constructive criticism or parental guidance. One of the things I think it's important to clarify is that in a power with organization or family, that doesn't mean that every decision is made by consensus. It means instead that every human being is consistently treated with the respect that every human being deserves, with the care and concern that every human being deserves. And there are times, lots of times, for example, when a leader in an organization has to make a decision. And they have the responsibility for making that decision. They may have gotten input from others, but they are going to make the final decision. And in a hospital setting, I've worked in a number of hospital settings in an earlier time in my career, there are those who are charged with making the final decision. So in a mental health treatment center, the primary therapist for a particular client is going to make the final decisions about interventions and treatment. In an operating theater, another great example would be a surgeon is going to have lots of assistants likely in doing their surgery. And as they learn, as they go through whatever procedure they're going through, they have to make the decisions about how to proceed. They're not going to be having a consensus-based discussion in the operating theater. But when they're not in the operating theater, they're going to be treating everybody with the kinds of respect that they deserve. It used to be that when a physician came into a nursing station, all the nurses would stand. And the doctor would be called Dr. So-and-so, while the nurses and other practitioners who are part of a treatment team would be just their first names. Well, that kind of thing is changing and has changed in many places for some time because there's an effort to create more of this power with way of doing things. That's just an orientation to what is power, how do we get it, and what are these two models for power, power over and power with. A lot of the work that I do with leaders and organizations is focused on better understanding themselves, their organization, and how to move more towards a power with style. Two of my books, the one that's for couples, it's called Making Love, Playing Power, Men, Women, and the Rewards of Intimate Justice, expands on this idea greatly. And the main focus in that book is on helping couples to build relationships that are based on power with. And then my other book that this is very central within is Simple Habits of Exceptional but Not Perfect Parents. So I hope this is helpful for you. Again, my name is Ken Dolan-Del. If this video was indeed helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Take care of yourself.